Well, that was interesting. We have all these great words of wisdom from Hamid Bey, and many times we don't use them. My talk tonight, the title is, What Do You Have in Your Hands? The idea for this came about 3 weeks ago. I was a guest on a radio show, a gentleman from New York City, Brooklyn. His name is Rick Young. And Rick has a radio show called What Do You Have in Your Hands? Now Rick's a boxer. He was a boxer. He now is a boxing trainer, but he also is a trainer in helping people become successful. And I was his 800th guest. So he does one of these a week. So he's been doing this for a long time. So what do you have in your hands? Here's a man with a string in his hands, and a kite on that string, and a key on the string, in a lightning storm. And Benjamin Franklin used that experience to discover electricity, which all of us use every day. And we assume that electricity is going to be there. Some of us have had power outages this winter, and it's pretty amazing how dependent we are on this electricity. But it came from a string in a man's hand. Another man retired, age 65. He looked at his first Social Security check and he started to cry because it was so small. And he was going to have to learn how to live on this very limited income. But what did he have in his hands? He had a recipe for fried chicken. And the rest of the story is Colonel Sanders turned that recipe into a very profitable retirement. He didn't have to be dependent on that Social Security check. What do you have in your hands? Here's a man who had a piano, I should say a boy. At the age of 3, 4 years of age, he was playing a piano and writing music, and he would have entire symphonies come to him complete. And Mozart, who we're all familiar with, had a piano in his hands. A scientist at 3M was making glue for masking tape, and she had a major mistake, and the glue wouldn't stick. It didn't stick very well. But instead of taking that mistake and rejecting it, she listened, she paid attention to what she had, and all of us use this product today in sticky notes. A mistake became a very successful product. What do you have in your hands? Here's a man with a pen in his hand. A local small town started a newspaper, and the newspaper asked him to write an article. He wrote an article, half a page. They liked it. They asked him the next week to write another article. And pretty soon he was writing weekly articles. Now this man had never thought about writing a book. But after about 5 years, he had over 200 articles. And his wife said, "Why don't you write a book?" Well, this began a process for another 5 years of this book, Put Your Health in Your Own Hands. The next 5 years were spent in putting all of that information into some sort of a format. Would anybody like this book?
I already have them.
You can have it.
Thank you.
I have a patient who has health issues. He has diabetes. And what did he have in his hands? He had a diet. I'd given him a year ago. This was called a grain-free diet. Now what's so great about a grain-free diet in a diabetic? Well, first of all, he's O blood type, and O blood types shouldn't do grains. It creates inflammation. And he had this thing for a year, and his blood sugars were through the roof. And finally I said to him, I think we're going to need to start you on insulin. And it shocked him. And he went home and he got his diet. And he began to take all the grains out of his diet. Now it took a little while, because what's made with grains? The grains in the grass family, breads, pasta, cookies, cake, lots and lots of stuff. But in a little over 6 weeks, he's down 18 pounds and his sugars are normal. Now why does this work? Well, every cell in your body is covered with receptors, insulin receptors. And an insulin receptor is like a lock. And insulin is a key. The key fits in the lock, it turns on a sugar pump, it moves the sugar out of your blood into your cells where it can be used for energy. Now when you're diabetic, if these locks are blocked by something, now there's sugar outside of the cells in the blood, but there's no sugar in the cells for energy. So your cells are starved, they're telling your brain to eat more, and yet you got all of this fuel that can't be utilized. Well, what happens is grains in the grass family have gluten, gliadin, and agglutinin. So these three proteins fit into these locks. Now they can't turn on the sugar pumps, but they can interfere with the insulin getting into those locks. So in most diabetics, the problem is they're making plenty of insulin, it just can't be utilized correctly. So by taking those grains out of the diet, he was able to get that mechanism working correctly. And within a very short time, he's got his diabetes under control. Now he had this tool in his hand for a year. Why don't we use these things? Well, we're creatures of habit. We don't necessarily want to change. Another patient came to me about 7 years ago. She came to get set up on hospice. She had stage 4 breast cancer, and the doctors had told her there wasn't anything else they could do for her. Now I said to her, if there's any chance you're going to survive this, you have to heal this issue between you and your husband. 20 years before, he'd had an affair, and she had never forgiven him. Now they're still married, but she had never forgiven him for this. So I gave her another tool that can be found in this book. It's called Emotional Release Letter Writing. And I learned about this tool. A gentleman named Dennis Adams, who was a speaker at the Coptic Fellowship probably 10 years ago, and introduced me to that tool. And I recommended it to many patients. So anyway, she went home, she wrote an emotional release letter, which disconnected her from this anger that she had toward her husband. She was then able to have a conversation with him, several conversations with him, and she is still alive today, 7 years later. This cancer went away with no treatment. So when she removed the obstacle to her cure, her body knew how to be completely healthy. It just needed to have that obstacle removed. What do you have in your hands? We all have money. Some a lot of money, some a little bit. But we get to choose how we spend our money. Are we going to use it for beneficial things, for detrimental things? Are we going to give some of it away? Are we going to stuff it in a mattress? What are we going to do with our money? We get to choose. That's what life is all about. We have all of these things in our hands, and we get to choose. What about our free time? I hear people say all the time, I don't have time for that. How many watch television every day? Most people in this room are, if you're not watching television every day, then you're very unique. Most people watch 5 hours of television a day. That's the average for the Americans. Now there's a lot of wasted time there. What do you have in your hands? You have relationships with other people, intimate relationships, business relationships, friend relationships. But you get to choose how you develop those relationships, what you talk about, what you emphasize, what you forget about. Everybody has flaws, but if we focus our attention on those flaws, what begins to happen is they begin to grow. So in relationships, we want to minimize those flaws and magnify those wonderful things that we love about that person. Most of us have careers. Some of us are retired, but that's a career. There's things that you're doing. So we get to choose. And if you're in a career that you don't like, It's very important that you change that and you do something that you love. You should jump out of bed every morning enthusiastic about what you're going to do that day. And if you're not doing that, it's having an acidic effect on your body. It's making your body chemistry acidic. And unhealthy things happen to an acidic body. What else do you have in your hands? Often we have a dream. Martin Luther King, famous speech, I have a dream. All of us have dreams. But many times those dreams are put on a back burner because somebody told us that we couldn't have that dream. I have a patient who, she's in her 70s. When she thinks of her father, I should rephrase that. When she used to think of her father, she would hear him say, "You're never going to amount to anything." So for all of her life, she's been hearing this. Now she used this letter writing technique. She disconnected herself from him. And now what she hears and what she sees in her mind is he's got his hands up in the air like the referee at a football game. And he's saying, "You're a winner." That's changed her life because she hears this. And so when she decides she wants to do something, she no longer hears that, "Who do you think you are? You're not going to amount to anything." But she hears, "You're a winner." So what do you have in your hands? Is there anybody here has something in their hands they'd like me to talk about? What do you have in your hands? What tools do you have? What ideas do you have? Give me an idea. What do you have in your hands? Am I going to volunteer somebody?
Do we all have the ability to heal ourselves?
We do. The question was, do we all have the ability to heal ourselves? Our body knows how to be perfectly healthy. I have a patient who's 102 years old. She lives alone. She drives her own car. She walks every day about a half a mile. She goes dancing a couple times a month. Perfect health. Now she's had issues, but she's got an amazing, amazing attitude. So, can we heal ourselves? Yes, we can. There are obstacles to the cure. Samuel Hahnemann, who created the system of homeopathy, he uses that term, the obstacle to the cure. So sometimes it's a mental, emotional obstacle. Sometimes it's a physical obstacle. If you drink too much alcohol every day, that's an obstacle to the cure. If you have emotional issues, that's an obstacle. Someone else, what do you have in your hands? What tools do you have that you've been just sitting on? So let's talk about an idea. What we have in our hands sometimes is just an idea. Maybe it's a dream, something we wanted to do our whole lives. But in order for that idea to manifest into physical reality, it has to have momentum. It can sit in the back burner as an idea for your whole life. I had an idea many years ago. I like to ice sail. And an ice sail is it's a boat with runners, one in the front, two in the back. And my idea was to manufacture this for the water with a surfboard in the front, two surfboards in the back, a sail, a little cockpit that you sat in, and these things are now being used. Somebody has done that. So often we just sit on an idea. So our ideas have to have momentum. Well, how do you get traction on this idea? How do you get momentum? One of the things is to envision yourself doing that thing, using that idea, as if you've already done it. Now, not like I'm going to do this sometime in the future, but you got to make this mental image of yourself having already done it. So moving this idea, building the momentum, building until you get a critical mass, and at some point, this critical mass, this idea, has to come about. It's one of the laws of nature. If you take a fertilized egg and you incubate that at the correct temperature, it is going to become a baby chick and a chicken. 21 days, that is going to happen. Now you can stop that. You can remove the heat, or you can step on it. Those are the obstacles. So our ideas, we need to have these obstacles removed, and then we need to focus as if we are already doing that thing that we desire to do. So if you want to have perfect health and be 102 years of age, you need to start now. And every day you envision yourself 102 years of age, driving your car, riding your bicycle, running up the steps. Not walking up the steps, running up the steps. Exaggerate it. Make it bigger so that your body gets instructions. What do most of us do when we get to be 60 or 70 years of age? We start to say, well, when you get to be my age, things fall apart. You don't want to do that. You want to think about yourself in perfect health. Now, once this happens, when you do this correctly, you're going to start getting guidance. And your guidance is going to draw you to do things like John has done for the last 50 years. Go to the gym and work out and exercise. Eat correctly. And meditate every day. Lots of us have these tools, but we don't use them. It's because we haven't developed enough momentum for these ideas to become part of our operating system. So once they become part of your operating system, your body knows what to do. It can do this. How many people here have a bucket list? A written down bucket list. Nobody? All right, you get an assignment. The next time I come back here to talk, 2, 3, 4 months from now, I'm going to ask you about your bucket list. If you don't have a bucket list, there's a whole bunch of things that you're not going to do. But if you have them written down, when I was 5 years old, I said I wanted to go to Egypt. And there were lots of times when I would think about this, that I would say, well, I'm probably never going to get there. But in the back of my mind, I knew that someday I was going to go to Egypt. Well, as soon as I hooked up with Barb and married Barb, the opportunity emerged because she was going with John to Egypt. And I said, can I go along? I want to fulfill that dream. So have a bucket list. It has to be written down. How many people have GPSs in your car? Okay, what happens if you don't put an address in there?
Doesn't tell you.
It doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't give you any guidance. It's just a map. So when you have this written down bucket list, when you have these written down goals, now you're going to get guidance. You're going to get spiritual guidance, and you're going to get intuitive guidance from yourself. So your assignment is write a bucket list. Anybody like this book? Anybody like to have this book?
I have it.
All right, I'm going to thank you very much. Next time I come back, we're going to check out these bucket lists and think about what you have in your hands. You have tools, you have opportunities, you have all kinds of things. The internet is filled with information. There's seminars to go to, there's retreats, there's all kinds of opportunities. So, put your health, put your life in your own hands. Thank you.